There we go. That's better. Let me try that again. Good evening and welcome. My name is David Vasquez-Levy. I serve as president here at Pacific School of Religion. And as other folks make their way in, we're just going to start with a short video to get us gathered together and have an opportunity to welcome you more formally to this evening's lecture.
My commitment is to the work of the next generation of professors. I really believe that we need to prepare academic leaders, in addition to all the other kinds of leaders that we have.
I see those new religious leaders as catalysts, and I feel that they have to be invested in.
To be a catalyst, either as facilitator and as a student too, is to actually curate a space in which we can develop honest and genuine conversation that pushes us to go beyond the superficial.
The new crop of scholars that we have come built in with interests that crisscross disciplinary boundaries. This is going to create a sea change in the way we understand knowledge.
Well, welcome to tonight's, to the 2024 Earl Lectures, Disruptive AI, Christian Nationalism, and Democracy. Welcome and you join us here in this space in the Berkeley Museum at Pacific School of Religion, or if you're joining us online from across the street or around the world. Begun in 1901, the Earl Lectures is one of the longest running series in California. It has included and featured some of the greatest folks who have some of the thought leaders in theology, in social change throughout this over 120-year history. And as we come together tonight, we seek to engage our Earl Lectures tradition in some new ways. Seek to really, as you heard Dean Susan Abraham articulate, the work of our faculty to crisscross disciplinary boundaries to think about our work. A couple of housekeeping notes as we gather tonight. If you are here in person, there is a gender-neutral restroom just right out of these doors past the stairs, and a women's restroom right above that in the second floor. If we have an emergency in this room, please just, there is one exit and it's right through here and out into the quad. If there's any emergency, we'll provide some directions, but it should be pretty easy for us to leave the room. We have placed paper underneath your chairs in advance so that as you listen to the conversation tonight, if you have questions you'd like to post for the follow-up Q&A, please you can write those and we'll have an opportunity to pass them on to others to receive. We hope that you can stay afterwards as well for a reception. If you are online, welcome again to being with us today. We're glad to have you with us. You can adjust your view depending on what you're able to see on your screen right now, but you'll see a slider, not necessarily in here, but if you're online, that can allow you to make both screens, the projection and the speaker, kind of adjust the size of what you would prefer to do in terms of your view of it. Please put in any questions or comments that you have into the chat, and know that those will be shared here in the space as well when we come to the Q&A. You may also request assistance in any way you need through the chat. Now, our theme tonight is critically important. As we have began our conversations this fall here at PSR, I have remarked on the fact that 60% of the world's population are electing a new leader this year. So we know as we go into this fall that for us as a nation, a critically important conversation about the future of our democracy, ideology, and which way we may pursue to build a society are on the ballot. That is critically important that at this time, just like we are here in the United States facing the importance of selecting new leaders for the nation, that most of the world is engaged in this process. And similar to the experience we are having in the United States, these are times of deep polarization. And there are different forces that are pushing the process of an election of a new leader for the nation, or new leaders for our nations, and for directions that are contrasting worldviews, many of which tend to focus either on deep exclusion and protecting the well-being or the historical values or the convictions of our community, or seeking sometimes to expand those. So it's important that we engage as communities of faith, as communities of academic endeavor around these conversations. And it's particularly important that we do so in ways that bring our various forms of knowledge and understanding to bear on these critical conversations. The Earl Lectures has historically featured thought leaders that come primarily from the theological realm, in what we have often referred to as public theology. The idea that religious thought leaders share their ideas with the world through these kinds of presentations. That remains an important part of our work at PSR and certainly of this series. But part of what we are seeking to do over the last couple of years is to shift the language of public theology to engage in what does it mean to do theology in public. For some of you, the word theology is very familiar. For others of you, it may be very new. It basically is big thinking around issues that matter, that are larger than the particularities of our ideas, of our own existence, but rather to think in big theological thinking is thinking in things that go beyond or transcend the boundaries of our own understanding. So in this work of doing theology in public, we have sought to engage thought leaders from across different disciplines. And tonight we are really excited to welcome as our professor of practice and leader of our lecture series this fall, John Robichaux, who is the executive director of UC Berkeley's Coleman Fung Institute for Engineering Leadership. The idea of the lecture tonight and others to follow are to engage in conversations across various disciplines. John is an award-winning executive educator and consultant. For more than 25 years, he has advised, trained, and consulted for hundreds of leading organizations in industry, government, and civil society. John has spent over 15 years addressing AI and AI's impact on democracy, human rights, and leadership. Prior to joining Berkeley, John helped Stanford University launch his flagship Institute on Human-Centered AI. The responder tonight will be Dean Susan Abraham. Susan Abraham is Professor of Theology and Postcolonial Cultures, Vice President of Academic Affairs, and Dean of the Faculty here at BSR. Dr. Abraham brings wide experience and knowledge in higher education and institutional practices through her past affiliation with St. Bonaventure University, Harvard Divinity School, and Loyola Marymount Field. Her publications, courses, and presentations weave practical theological insight from her experience working as a youth minister in Mumbai, India, and theoretical perspectives from postcolonial theory, cultural studies, political theology, and feminist theory. As we prepare to welcome our speaker tonight, I want to just do a dedication of tonight's lecture. We dedicate tonight's lecture to the memory of Jim Price, PSR class of 1958. Jim's life embodied the best of PSR in his political career as assistant to the mayor of Oakland during the 60s and Western Regional Director of the Department of Housing and Urban Development through the 70s, as well as his business pursuits as he and his wife Jane dedicated their efforts to developing and maintaining housing for low-income families. Jim's generous support of PSR put into action his belief in the impact of his alma mater on the world. The series we begin tonight was partly the result of my conversations with Jim over the last couple of years about the importance of publicly engaging politics, technology, and religion. He passed away this summer, and the last conversation we had with him was just as engaged as the first one I had with him 10 years ago when I started at PSR. This series pursues, in part, a question that germinated during Jim's studies at PSR and drove his life. How can government policies serve the most people. So as we prepare to welcome John, we'll watch one more video, and then I invite you to give a huge PSR welcome to our presenter for tonight, John Robichaux.
Religion and spirituality need some new representatives right now in our culture and in our society. You really need to invest in spiritually rooted change agents, because through the people comes the new world.
It's experiential. It's a whole different way of looking at education, of looking at growth and connection with other people.
PSR, that tradition of boldness, is something that we not just learn in our classroom and in our community. It's something that becomes part of who we are, and it is nurtured deep down in our soul.
For individuals for whom those scholarships were not available, would not see PSR as a part of their future, I see that as critically important.
Welcome, John.
Great. Well, firstly, let me thank you all who are here today in person and online around the world. It's a great honor to be here in the Earl Lecture Series. Whenever your name is next to some of the famous speakers, Teddy Roosevelt, Maya Angelou, Elie Wiesel, Alice Walker, others who inspired so many of us. It's quite a humbling experience. I will say, I'm not sure that Presidents Vescas Levy or Dean Abraham mentioned that when they first invited me. We were having a friendly conversation and said, hey, John, you used to teach religion. You now do a lot of work in artificial intelligence. Would you like to come speak? That sounds great. Only when I read the text for the announcement did I realize what we were going to be doing here over the next 4 series in earnest. The Earl Lecture Series is one of the most distinguished in the field of the study of religion. I'm really grateful for the faculty, for PSR, for the community, for the leadership that was shown through the series over the many decades now, century plus now. And I hope we can live up to some of that here today. Okay. My aim is to tonight set up the first of the 4 series. We are going to focus tonight primarily on AI and religion, because I want to get a good level set among those of you here and in the audience, and we will build on it throughout the course of the series on the broader topics. However, during the Q&A, if you want to preview any of the other topics, please don't be shy. So look forward to the discussion as well. Let's see. So here, talking about me. The only disclaimer tonight is that I'm not speaking for Berkeley or the Fung Institute. And let's see. Okay. You've all seen the Earl series, lecture series. This is your cheat sheet beyond the long paragraphs that we wrote. Eloquent paragraphs, of course, that describe the series. But in each of the 4 lectures, we're going to foreground a couple of topics. So this is your cheat sheet tonight: an overview of AI and religion, potential impact on AI on the practice of religion. Next week, meeting making. We'll have the film screening next week as well. Democracy, if that's your jam, see us in lecture 3 in particular, and then closing with leadership and action in session 4. So it really does build throughout the course of the series. We hope you'll join us either in a synchronous real-time environment or asynchronously. That is preamble. Preamble done. Now, how do you tell a story of AI and religion at this moment in history? So firstly, I could have begun this series by telling you that everywhere you turn today, you see AI in the headlines, but you know that. By the way, Taylor Swift is here. I could have said everywhere you turn, Taylor Swift is. You also know that. I could have begun the series by reminding you that AI has been around since the 1950s, in fact, including generative AI, and that there was a technological breakthrough in 2017, which led to a huge investment in 2021, which led to the moment when everybody heard about AI in 2022, the ChatGPT moment, becoming the most adopted app in history at that time. I could have told you that just a few years ago, 1 in 5 organizations, 20% of organizations in the country were using some form of AI. Today, that number is close to 75%. 1 in 5 to 3 in 4, 20%, 75%. We should expect that to grow. I could have started the series by explaining that there are really 2 big buckets underlying AI technologies. One, foundation models, on the right side there, is the one that you read about all the time right now, behind ChatGPT, behind generative AI, behind these models that can create videos and so on. But I also would have reminded you that AI exists in a very different bucket that's a more narrow use case set for AI technologies that are hyper optimized and don't have a lot of the pitfalls of the hallucinations and the error rates that we see on the foundation model side. In fact, if you have ridden on a commercial airplane anywhere in the world for the past several years, you have been protected by an AI anti-air collision system, which is far safer than anything we were able to develop in a pre-AI world. AI can be safe, can be optimized, and can be targeted to specific tasks. A lot of the examples I'll give you tonight are around that kind of AI as well. I could have told you that there are big buckets also of the types of AI that exist. I could have told you that robotics is something that we thought was going to be left behind in this big moment of ChatGPTs and computer visions and video and expert systems. That robotics was just wasn't quite, it doesn't have the data it needed a year ago. But now, this year, we've seen a huge leap forward, even in robotics. You know, the computer vision world where we can search for your family members and your dogs and your pets and your photos a day. That's AI. This is the broken microphone.
Grab your number 2 right there on the.
All right, let's see if this one goes. 1, 2, 3.
Long press.
Long breath.
You need AI operator.
I do.
Yes, I do.
How about this? How about this? How about this?
Back up on over.
Keep it going. Keep it going. All right, how about that? Okay. All right, so I could have told you that robotics has really really gone through a revolution in the past year, though you don't see that in the headlines right now. I could have told you that in the past just few years that on many important benchmarks, AI is meeting or exceeding human capabilities. And that we should expect that to only continue. And I might point out that currently, off in many areas, if you put an AI paired up with a human, you actually outperform either an AI alone or a human alone. So the complementarity that do together is a real potential place where we can see a lot of games. Could have told you a lot of that. But what I want to do for us, for this series, for this lecture, is to bring it down to the practice of religion. Is to bring it down to the ground level. And to talk about ways in which those of you who are in the religious communities around the world, the practices that we engage in, and how AI, in its current technological capabilities, and what we can see just over the horizon, could be impacting religion going forward. My hope is that if you're coming to us through the AI door, you'll see a lot of opportunities in the religion side of the ledger. If you're coming in to this series on the religious side of the ledger. Hope that you'll see a lot of impact around the AI side. But I hope that you leave here thinking, wow, that's a lot. There's a lot of potential for good, for ill, for AI within the religious space. And I really hope that I give you at least a couple of examples that you haven't thought about before. But that's my goal for tonight. And then take the discussion where we want. Okay, I'm going to begin with religious education. I'm going to begin with religious education because no matter where you are as a religious practitioner, there's some form of education that your community or your community practice is engaged in. I'm going to swap microphones. Okay, we're going to try this. If you have seen the headlines about teaching, learning, or other ways that AI can be used in a generic classroom, a non-religious classroom, I want you to right now just import everything you've heard and bring it into the religious education context. That's great. That's a shortcut. But let me give you this. Let me give you a couple of examples to maybe illustrate for those who either aren't as familiar or to bring it down to ground level for us. So in AI, we often hear things like, I get a personalized, AI can help me maybe get a personalized tutor on the learning side. If I'm a teacher, AI, there are models that can help me understand if emotional responses that are going on in the classroom, so I could have a camera embedded in my glasses as a teacher that can be sending signals to say, this person seems like they're not as engaged anymore. Hey, make another joke because we need to keep the lecture series interesting, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that are helping students. There are a lot of things that are helping teachers that are personally known. I throw up here 3 examples though, that may push us a little further beyond the headlines. So Reid Hoffman here is one of the founders of LinkedIn. He's somebody who's a real advocate for human-centered AI, or AI that helps for good. You may have seen that what he has done is he has created an AI duplicate of himself. On the left, Reid AI. And what he is able to do, all he did was had the AI read his books, had the AI watch his videos, learn his mannerisms, and then get some tune-ups. And now he's able to deploy that AI to a wide range of environments, meetings, speakers, interviews. He took a graduation, a commencement speech that he gave, had Reid AI immediately deliver it in 90 different languages. The possibilities on the religious side, you can imagine already. In real-time translation, real-time engagement for incredible presence, like Dean Abraham, like President Vasquez Levy, like any of your favorites. Duplicate, deploy, off we go in the AI space. Religious media, the current generative AI model that you're seeing in the news can create stories just from basic prompts. So this is a particular cartoon series that many of us have seen over the course of our lifetime or our kids' lifetimes. You can create entire new series now just by putting a basic idea into a prompt, and the AI can generate a cartoon series or some sort of educational program immediately. Immersion. Imagine creating, with current technologies, a program where you're now walking beside Siddhartha, learning directly from the Buddha or from Lao Tzu, the tenets of Taoism, where you are getting a peak fictionalized, of course, in those cases, but a peak learning experience that touches many of your senses. And we know that people learn better and hold on to beliefs longer and find more durable engagement with immersive experiences. That's possible today as we sit here. All right, religious social services. Efficiency gains, distribution gains, preparation, and the like. So I am someone who grew up very poor. I'm someone whose entire wardrobe at a certain point, all of our Christmas presents, all of our Thanksgiving meals were coming to us only because of the charitable donations of our religious community. And how would that happen? On the clothing front, they would hand us a huge, big black plastic garbage bag full of clothes. And me being a 7-year-old was like, okay, I like that, I don't like that, and I sure don't fit into 90% of this. And so then all that gets wasted or turned over. Today, we have technologies because of AI that would allow us to visually capture donations as they come in to help us sort by size, by style, by pick your metric. The AI is able to recognize that and can today help improve on efficiencies in the donation and distribution system for an essential piece for many of our religious communities on the social front. Relief services, same thing. AI is helping relief agencies pre-deploy food, water, staff, so that they can be right where they need to be at the end, after the disaster strikes. Unhoused. County Los Angeles here in California, working with social and government agencies to identify some 500 different data points that will help us predict, and is helping us predict, whether an individual or a family is likely to become unhoused soon. Get them in to intervene. Imagine putting those social services together with your religious communities or neighborhood religious communities, homeless services. Okay. Religious civil disobedience. We're at a school of religion that talks about the fearlessness. Many of us, of course, were raised in a world in which Dr. King, Gandhi, and Harriet Tubman here, shown here, were lauded for religious disobedience, for the sanctuary practices that many of our religious communities still adhere to today. AI is making it far easier to contraband, to surveil, to find religious communities who are engaged in conscientious objection and sanctuary activities in new Underground Railroad efforts here today. I throw 4 up on the screen here. All of it controversial, we can handle it because it's civil disobedience. Everybody agrees, we know. You've got people right now in this country, religious communities organizing to help women and pregnant people get to safe health care. We've got religious communities leaving food and water on the border illegally to help undocumented workers. We've got, when I talk to nonprofit leaders, I use the example, if I'm running a nonprofit for LGBTQA plus folks in Uganda right now with the repressive laws that they've passed recently, I am not putting security cameras in my church, in my community, because that is too easily tapped and used against us on the surveillance front. Same thing, second drug use, you can think about all the ways you can get tracked on your purchases, et cetera, through your phone. So religious civil disobedience, a lauded tradition in many of our communities, is something that will be negatively impacted in many ways by the AI revolution. There'll be some ups, but I'm flagging here some of the worries. Okay. In the United States and in many places around the world, healthcare is primarily or often distributed through religious communities. So like education, take everything you may have heard about AI in the healthcare space, new drugs, better diagnosis, personalized medicine, import all that into the religious healthcare context, and you've got the start of some of the impact that we're likely to see here. I'll give an assisted living example. So many religious communities run assisted living and long-term care facilities, not always thought of because the hospitals get a lot of the attention. Right now, I have a member of my family in an assisted living community that has a sensor in his room and a sensor on his bed to detect in the room if he falls, so the staff can rush and save him, or detects in the bed if he soils himself, because you can't have an elderly individual sitting, soil themselves over the course of many hours. Very dangerous situation. AI is helping us do better religious healthcare services along the way as well. Adjacent, Here's just how prevalent it is. This is only Catholic hospital beds in the United States. You'll see huge swaths of the country are often heavily served by religious hospitals and the like. So this is not just the occasional hospital or service that exists. Adjacent counseling and companionship, I'll just mention 2 examples here. AI companionship is a hotly debated topic, and the research is still coming out right now. And there's some studies that suggest it's really good for say, a population that's elderly, that's feeling more lonely, et cetera. We're finding other studies that suggest there's some real downsides there. So I'm going to acknowledge that the jury's still out here and leave that hanging for the moment. But I'll give you an example from my own family. So my own family has had many members who have dealt with dementia. And over time, since people are living longer, we're seeing a lot more dementia in our society. So this is more and more prevalent reality. My grandmother got to the point where she had effectively a 60-second memory. And those of you who have experienced this or know something about the caregiving world in this space know that it's just brutal for the families and for the caregivers. Right now, I've got a member of my family who has dementia, who prefers to call friends. Friends sometimes go on vacation. Friends sometimes aren't available. Take that Read AI duplicate, make it of my friend, and suddenly you're going to have a family member who feels comforted, who has companionship in a space where maybe it's a little less complicated than you and I having an AI companion running around as our best buddy, et cetera. So the healthcare context can really change some of that companionship. Counseling, for a long time, we've known that people are willing to share more intimate details often with AI bots than they are with a personal therapist, counselor, pastor. And so the idea that you could potentially combine use of AI counselors in your religious practice with pastoral practices that we teach and appreciate here at PSR, which is an incredible set of opportunities there. MBR reported this week how one of these AI counselors has saved many folks from suicide. Just because, again, people are willing to share. The AI bot is there when the helpline is not able to answer. Transformative, or potentially transformative. Worship rituals in small groups. I think this is a little more easy for folks to understand if you've been watching the headlines. So everything from small religious communities who don't have the money to have wonderful stained glass art, or have really art or meeting in a home, as many religious communities do. You can imagine the cost savings, and in fact, we know a lot of religious communities are currently using the generative AI to generate art for the communities. Dancing, religious dancing, not always prominent in some of our biggest U.S. religious traditions, but very prominent across religious communities more globally. This is a Lutheran pastor who gave a speech written by AI sometime about a year ago. Music, again, same thing. We've got churches who can't afford musicians. Got a beautiful organ, but it costs money. A lot of our communities just don't have access for that. AI can generate worship music pretty quickly, pretty cheaply. That can really help a lot of communities. And then I love the small group study example. So for those of you who've been to small group studies, you may have had this experience where you're reading a passage or talking about a particular topic and you realize nobody in the room really knows what they're talking about. AI tool to create an expert who can help us understand this is what this word means. This is what the context was. This is how different people have thought about it over time. You can have an expert right there on your phone for your Bible study group or whatever. Okay. Religious communities are administrative organizations. I'll give a couple of examples here on courts. So in one AI court example we were able to take, the organization was able to see a reduction in time from people getting their cases heard from years to months. We'll talk a little bit on the democracy session in the third lecture. I'll dive a little bit deeper into this decision making. potential for large church communities who really look to have different communities around, geographic region, et cetera, make big denominational level organizational decisions. We'll be able to spin that both on the civil side of democracy and on the religious decision-making side here. Smart buildings, you're saving tons of money that way, or potential there. And then I'll mention fundraising. When ChatGPT hit, the number one thing I heard from nonprofit leaders and religious leaders was, my boss says because of hallucinations, we should not be using AI anywhere in the organization. And immediately our fundraising team raised their hand and said, hey, we've been using AI for years. And in fact, for most large philanthropic organizations that rely on donations, AI is already core to the business, core to the practice. And so for religious communities, the impact of AI on fundraising is already robust. Religious war. You don't know enough just from the headlines about war making. This is not cooperating with my forward backward right now. Okay, well, I'll mention peace building. So peace building, AI tools can help us monitor agreements on the ground, so help us to determine if soldiers are staying on their side of a demarcated truce line or ceasefire line. So you can monitor whether food and humanitarian aid is getting where we agreed it would get to. You can help understand if there's, you can use drones to hear if there are shots fired in ceasefire areas, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot on the peace building side that doesn't get as much attention. So I want to underscore that. As well. And of course, communities of faith are often those that are helping lead those efforts on the ground. New religious movements. So here, think about how you've heard about AI talk about social media. The algorithm knows you, learns you, feeds you what you want to hear, feeds you what it thinks that you want to hear, gives you tips. New religious movements, you can imagine, as any community, new religious movements can now disseminate very widely. For new religious movements, this is has a huge potential, because now, instead of the 5 of us starting a new religious movement, we can now distribute pretty widely using AI bots pretty quickly. In fact, there's a course here at PSR that asks students to think about developing a campaign using AI and then shows them just how easy it is. So new religious movements are something that's on the radar. I will share, because my family was hit hard by a new religious movement that was really run by con artists and opportunists around the Y2K scare and the millennialist scare. It's also an opportunity you see here in small letters, but reminding people that whenever there's opportunity in the religious sphere where there's great conviction and great belief, there's also an opportunity for con artists and opportunists to come in and wipe out funds, as one such person did under the guise of a religious movement to my mom. So legitimate, new religious, and also others. Religious communities, YMCA, JCCs, a lot of opportunities there, buildings, administrative tools, religious environmentalism. So I worked with a mission order out of the Catholic community that would have cooperative farms. Now AI can help us make sure that the plants are watered properly, we get far more efficient use, fertilized properly, what's drying out, the health of the plants. Those tools can help in communities where poverty, water, food are really essential. Plenty of other options there too. Interreligious compliance. You know this from the headlines around morality and peace, but let me give you, so many countries, as you know, that have religious nationalism instituted, will engage in surveillance of various kinds. The AI tools around surveillance, around policing get to be deployed in those contexts. But let me give you an example that's not in the nationalist example. We have plenty of religious communities that are smaller and don't have the powers, the levers of government, but who could be using tracking devices, could be using AI tools for people even to opt in to say, yeah, help me make sure that I'm making my prayers, X number of times a day, that I'm, eating the foods that I'm supposed to, that I'm not communing with people outside of our insular community. So for insular communities that aren't tech averse, you have a real option here to police orthodoxy, is the harder way of saying that. That's an option. Religious higher education, let me just say, since we're in an institute of higher education, not only is it big business in the religious front, but the AI potentials here are, I don't think the headlines even do it justice. So right now, AI can help us on archaeology, on history, to read enormous volumes that no faculty member at PSR could ever do. And if they're trained well enough, they can actually give accurate summaries. Now, I'm not talking about hallucinations and errors that we read about in the headlines. Transformative for a historian, transformative for an archaeologist to be able to read a tablet that was previously unreadable thanks to AI. There are histories that will be entirely rewritten because of AI's impact within religious communities, I suspect. I mentioned teaching and administration, right? So I just throw them here. Missionary work, a lot of things we've already talked about, such as spaces, healthcare, etc. Religious education, worship, interfaith engagement. You've seen the commercials. I believe, you're probably aware that you can do real-time translation here. You can be talking to, so you could work not just in your own language on interfaith dialogue, which a lot of us do or have done, but now you can engage in multilingual engagement. One, two, that expert that I described in the Bible study example, where you don't really know, I don't really know why we do that. I'm trying to explain it to you because we're in this interfaith dialogue situation. I now can do more than Google it. I can probably find a tool, or there's a tool that could be built that really has the core stories, the core methods, the core orthodoxy or tradition to which I believe belong, and I'm trying to communicate in an interfaith context. It can also summarize, it can share, it can, if you were to create an AI duplicate, it can engage in the conversation with you. So you can learn something more about somebody else's faith without having to bother anybody else and on your schedule. So again, personalized education that could be deployed in interfaith context as well. Okay, closing in, just two more. Merchandise and goods. So I'm going to show you a slide here just to show you how big of a business this is relative to the religious economy in the United States. But everything from the design of religious goods to the fabrication, to the logistics around the business of them, to marketing and the like, that's all able to be impacted today, greatly improved, much more reach and costs reduced in the world we see today. Here's a chart from a couple years ago at this point. It shows the US religious economy. The researchers here broke into three buckets. Almost everything on this pie chart I've talked about already. Just to give you an idea, congregations are on the right, very small print, you don't need to read it or find it online later. Congregations, schools, and such are on the right. You can see that's only the second largest impact on religious economy. On the left, you see the charities, you see healthcare, you see higher education, talked about all those. It's about a quarter of this $1.2 trillion estimate of the US religious economy. The largest share of the US religious economy is in goods and services. It's in faith-based or faith-inspired businesses. So this slide, if it will go back for me. Yeah, this slide about design, fabrication, and the like on business world marketing, that's a huge economic impact. And if you're like me, when you grew up going every Sunday with my mom to buy a candle or a medal or something in the religious, in the religious store in the neighborhood, today AI can be driving cost down, can be driving further reach, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, policy advocacy. So, many religious communities, of course, are actively involved in policy advocacy. I do a lot of advising in this space. Everything from drafting policy, legislation, to analysis, to research. And then my line here, as you'll hear me say many times, is that nonprofits and churches need resources to help a lot of this AI be possible. We need compute power. But these technologies that I just glanced over in the last few minutes, A, are available today, B, are almost all active in some other space outside the religious context. C, many are being implemented within various religious contexts. And you can see, I hope, in reviewing what is now some 17 topics quickly, the AI really has the power to do a lot within this space of religion. And so 4 takeaways for you before I give you some fun things to think about, I hope. So AI is poised, as it exists today. So much more is to come later. As it exists today, it's poised to have an incredible impact on religion and religious practice, 1. 2, for those of you coming in the door today through the AI door, you see a lot on the religious front that may be of interest to you. I think I gave 3 or 5 billion-dollar business ideas. I'll cut my fee in half, just 35% when you're ready for scrutiny. Incredible opportunity for those of us in the religious space to be thinking about was there something here that struck you that you hadn't heard before? I hope. Is there something that, if you're in the religious space, you want to go learn more about? I hope. Is there something you want to ask us in the Q&A? I really hope. And then I gave you at least a couple of reasons today on the surveillance side in particular, but also some others that may have struck you, to get worried. And there's some that are well known. The hallucinations front gets the headlines, but the surveillance front on civil disobedience and the like doesn't always. That can matter to a lot of religious communities. So, okay, if that's the overview, what I wanted to do, so if that's the practical demand, if that's just one potential survey of looking at AI and religion together, and the practice, current technologies, here are a couple of more off the beaten path ideas. And again, all this is just the tip of the iceberg. So it is possible that in the next few years, as AI sort of begins to consume, or we get models that can consume, quote, all of human knowledge, that AI has become something like the basis for a new religion. Maybe they're the oracle, the font of wisdom. Maybe you've got a great AI model that's coming with certain answers and conclusions over here, and I've got an AI model that's coming up with different answers and conclusions over here, and suddenly we've got gods at war or at odds with each other. Oracles debating. So you've got an oracle question that could lead to all kinds of things. Does encapsulating all of human knowledge, is that sufficient? We use a lot of font of wisdom language in our religious community sometimes. Okay, meaning of humanity, this is broken through. You may have seen this in the New York Times, as Klein did a show on this, that when humans were trying to distinguish themselves from animals, we relied a lot on our logic, our intellect, our intelligence, quote unquote. Now that AI is meeting or surpassing, there's a lot of language that talks about our humanity as being rooted in our faults and our emotions. There's more animal-like things in the past. And so where AI makes us rethink what it is to be human, that could be a fun thing for folks to think about, and certainly for folks at institutes of higher learning and the like. What about the priority of humanity? Let me give you a potentially controversial argument. What if, we've spent so much time, or many religious communities spent time emphasizing humanity's centrality in the plan, the big P plan. And, we have some religious communities have also been willing to expand that to say, look, there's religion and there's environmental plans, and animals are part of the big P plan. What if you get an argument that says DNA is the code, this is carbon-based life forms, and an AI that becomes, independently intelligent and learning on its own is just a silicon-based life form that's coded in bits of the DNA. Aren't you humans just eating species? Very common. On most species, by the way. What if, there's a real uproar here for the rights of AI at a certain point to say, look, it's just another evolution in the process. Many religionists are perfectly happy talking about plants and pets and animals as a product of God's plan, but I grew up on a farm. A lot of the plants we have today, that's not natural. That's human invention. I have a pet dog that is not a natural breed. It was a human invention through breeding and life. Take that, apply that to the AI context. This argument or this debate could open up a whole world of rights for AIs. That's a wild world that we are on the cusp of here. I think this next one's particularly complicated. So I mentioned AI duplicates that can read AI. Right now, you may know that there are companies that are selling AIs that are built on your loved ones, or be willing to make a model that sounds and thinks effectively like a loved one in your family, and then sell that to you. You subscribe to it, so grandma can live on after she passes. Now, the read AI example is the low-hanging fruit. He only trained his model on his books and a few 100 maybe lectures online and the like. What if I have an AI on my phone, in my glasses, in my watch that follows me around with consent for 30, 40, 50 years, really learns me, and then when I pass, I hand that off to my daughter, who now gets dad with her for the rest of her life. Now, religious communities have always wanted to commune, and always do, or many do, talk about communing with the ancestors, communing with saints. It's the Dumbledore Hogwarts headmaster dream. I am president of PSR, and on the wall hang all the AI models built by prior presidents, and now I have the collective wisdom of an immense wealth of knowledge and experience at my disposal. That's potentially on the horizon. What would we think about that? Some of us would cringe, some would be excited. I think that's a particularly complex item that we ought not, that we can shift away from or have fun in thought experience with. And then finally, I'll just flag something that's going on right now that's not obvious. So I mentioned that I work with a lot of policy folks, a lot of nonprofits, leaders around the world, sometimes in this space, often on the AI front. Right now, there are a lot of privacy concerns around AI. I think you know that. Folks who read the headlines will know that. Legislation around privacy has been supercharged by AI that predated, there were questions predating AI because of social media companies. So our data needs to be protected. For religious communities, this became particularly important because a lot of our data can identify our religious affiliation, and in the wrong hands, that can be very. So currently, there's legislation in California and in DC, among other places, that are looking at privacy laws that might wipe away or require companies that hold our data to scrub certain features, race, gender, religion, and the like. And that is something that we often intuit as good. And I think coming into the policy space, a lot of folks in the AI space were like, yeah, that sounds great. And then when you go talk to religious organizations, you find out, actually, we really need that religious data for our fundraising, for our community. So that data privacy actually ended up cutting or harming religious communities in some way as they're reviewing it. A. B, legislators then often say things like, well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a nonprofit exemption. Churches don't have to adhere to this law. Problem is, a lot of religious communities rely on for-profits for their fundraising and their philanthropy. So the impacts also, while they may be intuitive or feel intuitive, yes, we want to protect privacy. Yes, we want to protect religious affiliation in data that's loose out there on the internet. That can really put people in danger and the like. And yet, when the religious communities who actually live it and understand what it could mean, ends up being actually a little bit of hesitation that surprised a lot of folks in the AI community as well. So these types of conversations, where we're looking at possibilities, where we're considering what might happen down the road, where we're considering what's possible today, are exactly the types of conversations that I hope this short introduction, short, I hope it felt shorter, is something that we can, kick off or can inspire you to be thinking about, how this, is either of interest to you, where it might impact you. Are there conversations that you need to have? Are there some places you want to rethink? And what should we talk about now? So thanks for your attention so far. Thanks too for dealing with the technologies. So coming up to the dais now is Dean Susan Abraham, Dean of the faculty here at PSR, and a one-time colleague of mine back at Harvard and a mentor of mine back at Harvard too. So it's a great pleasure to be on stage with her, and I want to thank her both for the invitation and the work that she does with PSR and for helping lead this conversation.
Well, thank you, John, for your words. As the dean, your talk made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I am unhappy. So I'm going to go for the jugular. So you and I were theologians at some point together. So here's my question, and you are encouraged to write a question and someone will collect them. We have a process of editing, sorry, because of time. So someone will collect them and, we'll try and respond. But I have a question to ask him because the hair on the back of my neck. So doesn't AI diminish the human precisely by giving us this capacity to be superhuman?
I believe this was reflected in the debate question that I said, what is it? What is humanity here? Right? So I love it. I don't know, and I'm not convinced. First of all, I think you heard me say, this is a real thing. What does it mean to be human now? I think we're getting a chance to revisit that question, which we thought was some to, in various ways, and certainly with, humans the center in some key characteristics, either divine image, stewards, depending on your various versions of it. So I don't know. I think it's an opportunity to ask the question again, and maybe even ask the question a little more intelligently. What does it really mean to be human? And then again, you heard me give a provocative version of the story where humanity might not be centered in some point in some folks' minds. And again, that may feel like a reasonable thing, but I'll say what I love about this question is that since I'm in the I get to avoid some of this to say an interesting question that theologians now have to deal with. But I think it's unbelievable in a world where AI is really raising critical questions. And so with that said, what I would also add is I think AI also has the potential in many places to allow us to be more human. So I mentioned the counseling bots that in some ways can do more good than human. Great. I mentioned some of the healthcare examples. For somebody who lost the ability to move and wants that back. Not everybody does. I know people wants that back and views that essentially who they are. There's an opportunity where the AI technologies on the healthcare side are really giving us new life, new ways to become either human again, et cetera. And then the ability to reach out and contact through the interfaith dialogues, et cetera. I mean, if human connection is something very important, AI is also something that can help us connect more too. So, core question, it's asking us some good questions, and I think it's the right kind of question that should be on the table. And I want to leave space at this moment for the possibility that AI can help us actually be more human when used, in those ways.
We should argue about that. But think about it this way. A lot of your examples focused on knowledge and concrete data. But one of the things we do here at PSR is to train our students in the art of insight. How on earth will AI help with that?
Yeah, this is a great question. So firstly, right now, some folks think that this is one of AI's least useful areas. So because it does rely on data to get built. And certainly in almost every model, but certainly the largest models, immense amounts of data. So there's some knowledge there. But what some critics complain is that, hey, look, the generative AIs aren't very creative, it turns out, because they're learning on things that have already existed in some ways. And we all know that sometimes that means nasty and harmful things because of the internet and the like. And so I think, for me, I'm not convinced that this is where we're going to land. I suspect that the creativity and the creative pieces of AI are going to be tuned up in the language one. Two, the reality is that there are many of us who don't have gift of insight, and AI can already help us. So if we're sort of below the mean or below average in anything, right? For me, I'm not a great artist, but man, if I've got a great story, I don't have to pay an artist now. I don't have to go find an agency. I can go to a generative AI and do it. And that's creativity more broadly. That's novelty more broadly. Insights? I mean, I think an AI purist would suggest that what AI often brings, certainly in narrow cases in analyzing data, is insight. But I don't know that it's the same insight that you would be thinking about teaching here as you're talking about humanity or connections or watching, or again, novelty. But the reason we often use AI for large data sets is because it can provide certain kinds of insight for us that we humans just simply can't. I mentioned the history example. We're going to read thousands of years of texts that we will never be able to. And there'll be some connections that it can find. Connections. Is that the insight that you're teaching? You tell me, but I suspect not.
I would say not, just to argue with you. I'm not a technophobe, I'm just, dramatizing this moment. But the idea that when we become superhuman, we would arrive, that is abhorrent too. We were meant to be fragile so that we count on each other, so that we learn with each other how to be human. And then for some of us to call on a greater force that we call God. All that disappears when we become so powerful. Sorry. That's why.
No, it's good. No, I love the idea of our brokenness and our fragility as being essential to our human experience. I take Sue's provocative point, and I think the psychology examples at least gesture towards AI in cooperation with human psychologists, for example. If that's one of those areas that continues to be more beneficial when they're complementing each other, AI is a tool on the way too. In the same way that I give a cup of water to somebody in thirst. I'm exercising my humanity in a profound way. Not superhuman. Right? Doesn't have to be. But I do like the question of superhumans because what do we do with that? I don't know what we do with that. I mean, there are plenty of people right now this way. There are plenty of people in my life who are much better at almost everything than I am. And I'm not sure because you're an incredible theologian or because you're an incredible artist that I have to that diminishes my humanity and the things that I'm doing. And so maybe there's an analogy in that to the idea that you can have a really powerful AI call it superhuman, call it, whatever. And we can still have, really powerful and robust and can be complementary to us who are trying to be human well.
So some of the questions that have come up, here's one. Is there something truly new about generative AI? Is there something truly new about this moment? Because human beings have always created. What's new?
Yeah, that is new. Yeah, I think when we talk about the newness of the moment, there are a few things. First of all, you see, that slide I flashed before us early on that generative AI, in particular, among other types of AI, have been around since the 1950s. There's definitely so what's new. So when we think about newness and then you expanded that to creativity and so on, which is great. When we think about newness, I think we think about a few things. We think about, speed. We think about reach potential. We do think about, not on the generative front, but on other fronts of AI, the ability to aggregate enormous amounts of information. But on the creativity front, there are whole fields of newness I'm going to propose here. Sorry, I'm going to take a stand on this one. There are whole fields of newness, I think, that are being built right now. So I led the arts and tech faculty and student group at Stanford. We had students who had been creating music for years, who are now using AI tools to further create new tech. So the newness there, seems to be not just the creativity. There's not newness in the creativity, there's newness in the tools, there's newness in the capabilities as well. So again, we think of speed, we think of reach, we think of reducing costs and access as new features. But maybe at the end of the day, I could take the questioner's point to say those are all differences in degree, not in kind. I think that's fairly relevant. I will say, given that AI is a keystone technology and it's likely to impact from how the light shines to how this air is circulated to what I'm eating because I'm relying on it to maximize my health and performance or whatever, that there's a newness in pervasiveness as well. That again, you tell me whether that's degree or kind. I think it's at least a different world and a different set of questions for us.
And you remain excited about this?
I'm excited. She's really excited. Yeah, I am excited about the upsides. I think that should be clear from the healthcare examples, from the charity examples, from the reach examples, from the peace building examples. But while I did a lot of excitement on balance on the examples that I flagged, today in the slides, don't miss the surveillance, don't miss the oppression, don't miss the policing, don't miss the coming after some of this reading. Don't miss that there's real downsides as well. And so I would say, I'm trepidatious. I have great trepidation in this era. And so, where I spend a lot of my time in the AI space is trying, and in these conversations is attempting to help folks see those choice sets that are before us all. That'll be one of the themes of the last two lectures for me, not just AI developers, but for us as citizens and how we make our decisions going ahead, and for leaders. And that choice set, maximizing the good, diminishing the harm, I think that's the critical moment we're in. And so for us, I view us as having a profound sense of responsibility. Responsibility for me is both an excitement thing and it's something that I worry about and I want to get right. And so I hope we get this moment right. And so, by sharing examples, by talking about the complicated nature, that excitement is always tempered. But yeah, I'm excited about my, my grandmother with dementia being able to feel comfort. Because remember, dementia patients, they may not know the thoughts, but they feel the feelings. And so there's a real humanity, a real generosity, and real power in that I do want to lift up as well. And I am excited. Darn it, if you're out there, tracking your apps or spying or whatever, for all kinds of nefarious purposes. I'm not excited about that.
Mm-hmm. But speaking about responsibility, here's a question that wants to ask about the potential environmental impact of creating these large systems that consume so much energy. So as we become superhuman, we are draining the planet.
Yeah, I think this is, first of all, this is one of the most urgent topics in the AI community today. And I'm going to use that term broadly, but I'm also going to quickly come in and squash that a little, because there is still a fervent within the AI technology community to push. But it's also the case that there are many folks who are working on the environmental impact problem. So, for example, The chips that underlie the cutting edge technologies in AI right now are not made for AI. They were made for other things, graphic processing units, right? And so GPUs. So right now there's a race to build an AI specific chip, for example, that will dramatically reduce the power consumption, energy consumption. Right now, as you know, there's a race on the energy side too, to make sure that we get enough renewables to support whatever comes next. But look, the projections 10 years ago, projections 3 years ago, did not include generative AI boom, November 2022 when the ChatGPT moment happens. So now suddenly we're rewriting everything about what we need in terms of energy and future and projections. And there's an immense race for students in my programs, for students in programs back at Stanford and MIT and elsewhere, trying to solve for this. And I think right now, we're not in a good spot. We cannot proceed with all the AI interest that we have, and again, all the good we can do under the current dirty AI variants that we see. And so that is an essential and I think a fundamental thing. And in fact, for us at the Fung Institute, where I do spend my daytime, AI and sustainability is a strategic priority for us to get right with emerging engineer leaders. One of the premier engineering programs in America.
So one of the questions asked here, have you defined AI? What makes technological processes intelligent? So why do we call it artificial intelligence?
Yeah, good. I did not. Thank you for noticing. I suddenly feel like I'm back in my graduate school, because that would be the first thing I would point out. Define your terms. So I'm appreciative of the question in particular. No, in fact, in the technical community, there's a debate over whether it should have been called artificial intelligence or intelligence augmenting intelligence, AI or IA. That's an old debate going back to the 50s and 60s. I think, what we're really looking at, if I were to unmask it for a second, what we're really looking at is probabilities, best guesses. And is that any different than a lot of the language or conversation that we have day to day? My poor wife, who I hope is still watching online, I think is still watching online. She jokes with me because I started giving probability scores to statements that I say in everyday conversation. I think that was so and so who said that. You think? Well, okay, maybe it's a 30% score, right? So it's all probability, right? But in conversation, we're also kind of making best guesses. If you don't have the knowledge, sometimes, folks feel you may have met somebody who will, fill in the gaps all the same. Right? This is why I think generative AI hallucinations are best thought of as you bloviating a friend or family member who's giving you about 70% truth, about 30% BS, and you don't know which one it is. It's all probabilities. So is it intelligence? Like I said, I think there's genuine insight into what AI can do. Is it going to meet your definition of intelligence? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's artificial.
It's artificial.
So very interesting questions here. It'll take me a little bit of time to read these. So here's a fun one. I really resonate with this one. Many of us have seen the Terminator movie series. It's a backdrop to thoughts and fears about AI that doesn't feel like we have addressed it directly enough. So what happens to artificial intelligence that becomes super intelligent?
Yeah, and super intelligent here. I mean, I love the Terminator examples. I often make Terminator jokes in my work. I also, I'm wearing my Star Trek cufflinks tonight. Because there's a good cultural counterexample of whether it's the computer helping the team or whether it's data and the next generation, the Android. We also have other examples of AI that are maybe on the less destructive side. I would say that Skynet's problem in the Terminator series is that it has access to sensitive systems like nuclear and kinetic kinetic energy. And that is actually one of the questions this month that is live in Sacramento as Governor Newsom is debating whether or not to sign one of the pieces of AI legislation that made it to his desk, which, if it goes to law, would require models over a certain dollar amount or data parameters, would require them to be tested and certified safe against nuclear capabilities, weapons capabilities, bias, and other things like this. And I have to say, it's not a clean cut for those who are advocating for and against that legislation right now. But the terminating question may be, I'm okay with the superhuman as long as it doesn't have access to the nuclear codes. They're great
They're
possibilities for
interesting
superhuman.
humans that have access to
Yeah.
nuclear.
Well, we're trying to say,
Yeah, I mean, you invoked Star Trek, so that's the thing for me too. If I remember correctly, Data, you talk about Data, right? So Data in the next generation spent half his career trying to become human. That was evolution for him. And then he ends up as a professor. So all PSR professors, y'all have evolved, like really evolved. So it doesn't make any sense to me that in our cultural imagination, as we think of artificial intelligence, that deep in there, we also want to build the possibility that it will become human and not displace us.
Yeah, I love this question. There are a few variants in the AI history of AI around this. So there's the famous Turing test named after Alan Turing, one of the fathers of artificial intelligence, which says if you didn't know whether it was a human or an AI generating this response or engaging with you right now, if you can't tell the difference, it's past the. And so, there's a world in which, there are AIs that are very human-like, can mimic human. By the way, ChatGPT was one of the early times when folks thought we may have actually crossed that threshold. A lot of what's written by ChatGPT, I can't tell whether it's you or a bot, and that was not always the case. That was often not the case before that. So it's another inflection point that 22 will represent. But the idea of an AI more human, that's very common. It's common on companionship bots that I referenced here. It's common on agents who can help us, who can help us book, our calendar invites, our office meeting, we can write emails back. That's right now a big area of research. So the idea of AI is becoming human is great. I also, want to remind us that a lot of AI is actually supposed to do things that we can't. Superhumanness really becomes important, but it also doesn't have to be super in the sense of hierarchical in the same way that we fear, I think. It can be super at, you need my laundry in a, environmentally friendly way so that I can spend more time with my child. It can be as mundane as that. That's where those narrow AIs become really interesting and not just duplicative. In fact, in factories right now, what's the best thing about AI machines? They're not human. And they can do things a lot better. Certain types of tasks a lot better. So I think there's definitely a mix of technology that we ought to keep in mind. And I want to avoid broad brushstrokes on this type of point as well. Yeah.
Thank you. How about AI helping us with really intractable problems in our world? The eternal argument between men and women, for example. Is somebody going to solve that soon? Or like the big issues facing us, the Russia-Ukraine problem, Palestine-Israel problem, the homelessness problem.
Yeah.
Will we pay attention to AI, or will we just dismiss it because?
Yeah, so I think this is where so there's so I also taught War and Peace and ethics of war and the like. And there's famous quote, war is too important to be left to the generals, right? So somebody comes in, the politicians come in over the generals. I think there's a real sense that humans in the loop, there's a real sense of AI is too powerful to be left to the AIs alone. There's some sense out there that exists. There's some folks that are necessary, and we hear that a lot from ethical and from safe AI advocates. However, I think what I want to say to this type of question is the intractables, even if it proposed solutions, are only solutions if we take them up. One, Two, I think there are areas where we could identify AI is helping us with really important solutions, climate sustainability being one obvious one, where AI is helping us identify new materials to create new types of, to create more sustainable materials, lighter uses. I mentioned the energy questions, et cetera. So that if that's one of the intractable problems, yes. If you're talking about solving, real ideological disputes, I think my AI oracles example may help here. You're gonna end up, you could end up having AI models which, come to different conclusions, but whatever the scenario, we have to make the choice to adopt whatever the proposal is. And so I think again, I think you cannot lose human peace or respect. I don't think we're going to be able to lose that human peace as we sit here today, unless they get access, right? Unless the terminator thing happens and you no longer have access and they lock you out to the bombs, et cetera. But that's a different type of question than I think what's at the heart here, the intractables. Some things, climate change, yes, some things, war and peace, ideological debates. Maybe it's a tool that helps us get to some unique solutions. Maybe it divides the land or the borders in a great way that's more fair, more equal. And we go, I think it's wonderful. But we're going to have to make that call at the end of the day as humans, as citizens, as leaders.
I know we're coming to the end of our time, but let me end here. So just that we have a bridge for next week. So you have been a little bit of an evangelizer and a prophet of artificial intelligence. But from the questions I have and my own thinking, we're not quite yet there to be converted to what you are preaching. So our big question remains, how does this take away from our humanity? That is our big question.
I'm excited to talk it over and with you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, Susan, for a great conversation. Thank you all very much for your attention, your engagement tonight. I don't know about you, I've got images of Prometheus, kind of how do we deal with technology, the bringing down of fire from heaven, of Pinocchio or Data desiring to be human, and asking the question of what it means to be human, ideas about keystone technologies. And if you're not yet picking up the serious theme here, we are beginning discussing AI as one of the systems that is a keystone technology, something that, as John has shared, shapes just about everything we touch. Religion is the original keystone technology. It is the way that humans have tried to make predictive sense about the future, what comes next, how we live together. So our question over the next couple of weeks will be to think together as we head into this fall's election, as we think about our life together beyond that. How do we manage and use these technologies, these ways of organizing and making meaning of the world, and seek ways that they can lead towards the kind of collective reality we want to live in? And how do we learn together by engaging across disciplines and traditions to be able to do this? How does that lead us to ask questions about communing with the ancestors through AI, to be able to think about how we might define being human, not just by our intelligence, but by recovering our sense of our very animal nature, that's what may remain for us to be human. So I've been greatly engaged tonight by your thoughts and conversation, eager to continue to think about how these conversations will shape over the next couple of weeks. I want to give a word of thanks again, if you join me one more time, to John, to Susan, for your time and for their partnership with us tonight. I'm eager to look forward to our continued time. I want to also invite you to take a look on your chairs or your tables. Is a note about a project that we are beginning here and launching in just about a month here, Quarry. That is an effort on part of PSR to engage technology as a way to reach broader in our society. The key question is, how do we put our why to work? The things that make meaning for us, the things that make sense for us in the world. This is a use of technology to be able to create a community-based learning platform. The interest is not so much the technology itself, but the community that it can gather behind it. The individuals whose life can be transformed by access to the kind of education that many of us have been privileged to receive by the access we have had, but is not accessible to many more. And so how does this technology allow us to transform the lives and the leadership capacity of people who are seeking to engage a much more complex world, not necessarily always with the kind of resources that is required to be able to pursue a graduate level education? We also want to invite you to think about the next couple of sessions that we will have will be here on Tuesdays. There is a design to this, because a few Tuesdays from now, many of us will be staying up late to try to figure out what kind of discerning the nation might make about who will hold the code to the nuclear armament. And so it's an invitation to spend the Tuesdays getting ready for that. And also a reminder that next week, also as part of our series, we'll add an extra time if you want to hang out with us on Thursday. We will be doing a screening of a film called Bad Faith that looks at the rise of Christian nationalism as a key part of our conversation here together. And a response panel following that. This will be at the Elmwood Theater here in Berkeley. This event is only person. We will not be screening that online. But we invite you to join us at 7 p.m. at the Elmwood Theater. Part of the panel will be include Bishop Yvette Flunder, a PSR alum, and a really remarkable leader in our communities. So I invite you to participate in that. And we encourage you also to think about the work that's going on here on Holy Hill. What you've experienced tonight is a part of the conversations we are seeking to make possible as we partner with others across disciplines, across age on this beautiful campus, and to encourage you to learn more about what we do here at PSR. And with gratitude to those who support our work, also an invitation to others to seek about ways that we can create on this Holy Hill and through this place, transformative leadership around our communities. So thank you again. We invite you to stay for a little bit of conversation afterwards. We have some refreshments on the back as well. Thank you and have a good night.